welcome to the How to Podcast series. My co-host today is from the beautiful, wonderful place on the planet, the marvelous UK. Dave Barr is with me. Dave is a podcast host, and he will help you spend money because that's what he's all about. He's the real life buyer, and he's on the podcast. He gave a great tip right off the beginning in the episode, and so we copied it. We made a copy of it, dropped it at the beginning of the podcast. Here's Dave's tip on how to get your guest engaged to promote your podcast. It's really a great idea, and I love it. So we're going to give you an example right here. Here's Dave showing you what it's like to get a great promo from your guest. Here's Dave.
Hello, I'm Dave Barr. I'm the host of the Real Life Buyer podcast, and I'm currently with Dave Campbell, and we're talking about podcasting, and we're discussing some really cool things about what equipment to get, why am I podcasting, where am I going with my podcasting, and I want to share all these different things with you, obviously with Dave and his audience, and hopefully you'll get something out of this to give you the encouragement to get out there, become a podcaster, make a change in the world, and do something that's really going to help people in their lives as well. So, hope you enjoyed this podcast. We've had great fun, and I really enjoy working with Dave, and I look forward to doing some more work maybe in the future.
Okay, welcome to the How to Podcast series. I have a gentleman here with me that's really good at helping you spend your money. He is known as the real life buyer. Dave Barr is with me, co-hosting here on the How to Podcast series. Dave has a podcast which we're going to talk about, and we're just going to talk about all things podcasting. And Dave, welcome to the podcast. So happy to have you here from sunny England. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Dave. It's an absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to this.
Excellent. I've been listening to your podcast, so you're going to see some St. Catharines, Niagara Falls in your statistics. That would probably be me. So I'm loving the podcast. Great to listen. Can you give a shout out for your podcast right off the top? What is the name of your podcast?
Well, it's called The Real Life Buyer, as I am a professional purchaser by trade. It's something I've had now coming up for 2 years. Absolutely love doing it. I've gone from a fortnightly podcast to a weekly podcast, predominantly because I was having so many guests wanting to come on the show, which is absolutely wonderful for me. Obviously, I like to share lots of information with people. You mentioned that I love spending other people's money. That's always a great way around. I much prefer that way than the other, even though my wife might not take the same belief. But what I'd love to do is I love to meet people. Obviously, in my job, I'm meeting people all the time. I'm always meeting suppliers and contractors and such. And what I love to do is interview entrepreneurs, authors, thought leaders, obviously business professionals, and tease out of them the new ways they are thinking of in running their business, what problems they have and the solutions they create, what new ideas are coming forwards. And I love to share that with other business people so everybody gets to learn and do things much more, hopefully, efficiently and effectively than perhaps they did before the podcast.
So what was the moment that for you that the light bulb went off and you thought a podcast is something that I need to do to grow or to build my business? Well, take us back to that moment when you were recording that first episode and, what was the beginning for all this?
Okay, the catalyst. The catalyst really started at the onset of COVID. I kind of discovered podcasts at that time. I happened to be obviously still going to work. My factory produce a product that is quite important for the food and biopharmaceutical industry, and so we needed to keep going. But there's a number of people obviously that didn't have to go in; they could work from home. I'm not one of those people. I'm very much involved in the day-to-day. So I discovered podcasts, and a guy called Nick Bradley, who's got a podcast called Scale Up. It really got me hooked. And one day I just reached out to him and said, "Oh, really interested in podcasting. Love to know how you got into it and the kind of gear that you purchased." I didn't honestly expect Nick to come back to me, but he did. Kind of blew me away with his response, and he gave me loads of information and basically kind of called me out. So I love a challenge. That got me thinking about this, and that combined with another historical problem as a very young man, as a teenager, essentially. My challenge when I was very young was to be able to speak fluently but without a stutter or a stammer, as some people refer to it, which meant almost every sentence I came out with had a speech impediment. And so for me to be able to transition from 10 years plus where I had this very difficult situation, you can imagine what it's like being a young child and a stammerer in schools, and even going into early years as an apprentice, that was quite difficult. The Mickey taking and such that you kind of get. But various things occurred which enabled me to break out of the stammer. And so the two things, being able to speak in a format like this, and somebody of Nick Bradley's stature giving me all the tools that I needed, really said to me, I needed to get and do this now. And so I took Nick's advice. I bought some pretty basic kit, and it still holds good to this day. Very simple stuff. It's a simple Samsung Q2 mic. I downloaded some software. I use Zoom predominantly at the moment. Just a very simple light, and took the advice of making the area where I'm working as kind of soundproof as you can realistically. And I really started to tap up business people that I knew and say, hey guys, I'm thinking of doing a podcast. Who's brave enough to come and join me? And a lovely set of guys put their hands up and said, yeah, I'm happy to come on. I don't know what it's all about. I don't really understand podcasts, but, we'll give it a go. And so we did. Nerve-wracking, shall I say, as well. I was really trying to figure things out. The tech, I'm fairly computer savvy, but this was a completely different arena for me to work in. Software I've never used before. Mm-hmm. Social media, to be honest, I really hadn't become conversant with. Certainly all the different forms of social media. So how do I get my message out? Where do I host? Who do I talk to about hosting a podcast? All these things. I had to have this a massive amount of information downloaded into my head, basically. But it was the best thing I've done. It's been absolutely a superb experience. It's given me an opportunity to speak to so many people, influential people, fascinating people, and very kind people as well, to come on and talk to me about their specialist areas.
So now let's go full circle, Dave. You reached out to Nick, and Nick was helpful for you, and that's so kind. We'll put a link to his podcast to share with everyone as well. You reached out to Nick. He helped get you started. People are going to reach out to you now because you've been doing this for a while. What kind of things would you say to somebody starting today, right now, that's listening to us, on getting started? Whether they are great with technology or not so great, how do we get going? What do we do?
Well, there have been a number of people who have, in fact, contacted me, and I've had them on the podcast and such, and it's probably ignited 3 or 4 people's passion for podcasting, and now they are regular podcasters. It is quite scary, but there's a few key things I'd say. You don't need to spend an awful lot of money. Absolutely, a few £100 sterling, a couple of $100, and you can get started. So don't go overboard and get too obsessed by the tech and spend all your cash. It really isn't necessary. You can practice on your own at home. You can practice your technique, and the key thing for me is practice and preparation. So prepare what you want to do, what you want to talk about. Get an idea. What is it that I want to help people with? And the key thing for me in that is helping people. I'm not just doing this for myself. I love helping people get a buzz out of people coming back to me and said that was so useful, that podcast. It touched something within them. Some of the people I've had on have had fantastic thoughts and ideas. There's a particular podcast recently where I had a lady who came and talk about grief and in fact cancer, because her partner had passed away. You think, well, why did I have that on my podcast? Well, the reason was that I've been touched by people in my own role from them going through a very difficult situation themselves. And when somebody walks into your office and say, hey, this is happening to me or to my partner or something like that, the question is, how do you respond? And so I felt it was important that the knowledge, the experience, the sharing of that information from somebody who's experienced these difficult times would be very useful for other business people to be aware of and prepare for and consider. So a lot of the podcasts I have been responded to by people and saying this really helped them in their business, or helped them in making decisions, or it helped them in many different ways. And that really gives me a kick. To be honest, it's fantastic knowing that I'm making a difference. Even if it's only to one person, it's made a difference and it's helped them move forward with their life. So absolutely, do it. Follow through with what you want to do. Be clear at what you want to do. What is your passion? Because you do need to have a passion for this. Don't just make something up and say, hey, I'd like to talk about this, but not have a passion for it, because you'll burn out. Don't be under the illusion this isn't, or it could be quite a lot of work. I work quite a lot on this because I really enjoy it. I love it. And if you want to make a success of anything, you need to work at it. And so it's helped me develop my talking techniques, shall we say, my interview techniques. It's helped me learn new things I would never have learned before. It's introduced me to new people who I probably would never have had an opportunity to ever speak to in normal circumstances. It's opened so many doors and so many new experiences. I can't say how anything other than it's been a really positive experience for me, but it is challenging. Don't pretend it's going to be a walk in the park, because it isn't always.
What's changed for you, Dave, from the beginning of your podcast to more recently? Have you changed, how often you do your podcast episodes? Have you changed the structure of your show at all? Is there anything that's changed for you?
Yeah, lots of things have changed, Dave. I'm always trying to find new ways of improving what I do. And let's just say to support more and more people. And there are so many different things that you need to understand, or I feel I need to understand. Obviously, I mentioned going from a 2-week to a 1-week podcast because of the influx of people that wanted to come on the podcast, and I didn't want to disappoint them with saying, I'm sorry, but it's going to be X number of months before this releases. That compelled me to do things more frequently, and I was advised by another podcaster to say, hey, if I was you with this content, I would be looking at a weekly podcast. And again, that was a challenge, and that spurred me on to have a go at going from once every 2 weeks to every week. I've looked into so many different things about how to name and why to name your podcast in certain ways. Understanding the technicalities behind how to get sort of SEO, how to get that working for you. So I'm still trying to find my way with all these things. How to get the message out. I mentioned social media. How to let people know that it's out there. I have tried multiple different things to constantly improve, and I'll never be happy. I know that because that's my nature, but I will keep trying to refine and improve all the time. I get involved in a lot of podcast forums. I speak to a lot of other podcasters. I'm constantly trying to learn how to do things differently and in a better way. I would say it's constant change, tweaking, adjusting, trying new things, trying different techniques on social media, using video clips, obviously the sound bites from your recordings, just trying different things to see what impacts on my listeners or my potential listeners and brings them towards the show. And it's a constantly developing thing. As we all know, social media is constantly developing and changing. The algorithms are constantly changing. So you've got to change with it. Just don't think you can go out there and keep a static, do this way today and keep doing it for the next 10 years and it'll still be okay. I think that's pretty unrealistic. You have to keep trying new things. And I really enjoy that. I have immense fun trying new things and seeing how it works and seeing the feedback from people.
Anything that you've...
How about you, Dave?
Yeah, for me, I have 6 podcasts that I do every week. And one of my podcasts alone, it's Living the Next Chapter. I've had 120 interviews in 9 months. And it is amazing.
That's incredible.
To have that many people come to you and want to spend time with you, and again, to meet great people is so encouraging to me. I have the same problem where I had more episodes than I had space to upload them and send them into the world. I had a limit. So I had to kind of be creative because, to your point, I would be saying to my guest, that was a great interview. They're like, when can I have a copy? And I'd be like, well, how's 4 months from now? Because I have this backlog of done, completed episodes, and I have no way to get them into an audio format. So what I did is I switched gears, and what I tell my listening audience is head over to YouTube, and you can get today's episode that was recorded today. You can access it now. You don't have to wait. It will show up once I'm allowed to upload it because every month I have to wait. But you can jump the line and go listen to these now. And so my YouTube channel is growing because my audience is saying, well, I really want to hear the next episode. So I give that to my guests within 1 or 2 days, and then the audio version comes later. So it's great when you have that constant flow of guests, interesting guests. And I've never had to use any kind of service or hire anybody to find me a guest. Now my guests are becoming my biggest support and promotion team. They're telling their fellow authors, come talk to Dave. So it's just happening. Yeah. And every day I see another invite in my inbox, and it's exciting to see that.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. It really gives you a buzz, doesn't it? And to meet these people who are from all walks of life. Some are extremely successful, very wealthy, very intelligent people to want to come and talk to you. It's a wonderful experience, and you want to make sure you serve them as well as give them the respect for coming to spend their time with you, because that's very valuable to people. You want to do the best job you can.
Yeah, Dave, do you ask your guests to share the episode? Do you do anything like that? Do you request that of your guests?
Well, I always encourage. I ask. I certainly don't demand anything. One of the things I ask my guests if they wouldn't mind doing, and I think it's something that I've had some positive feedback for, is to say, would they mind doing a 30-second to 45-second introductory clip for themselves? Hey, I'm Mr. XYZ. I'm joining Dave Barr on the Real Life Barr podcast, and we're discussing A, B, and C.
Nice.
And when I put that out as one of my social media posts, people have the opportunity to, just for a short clip, seeing who I'm interviewing right now, and it's coming out on the podcast the next day. And I think it's just a nice little different, a different thing where they can share something directly to my audience rather than me saying, I've got somebody coming on and this is the person and this is what they do. And I find that very helpful, and I think it's a nice little touch. But again, I say, look, if it really is something you haven't got time for, then I'll create something that's not a problem. Obviously, I love for them to engage with the posts.
Mm.
I post on 4 social media at the moment. I'm looking at YouTube. It's going to be interesting going to video, but I post regularly, and I try and add in other content as well. That's not just about the podcast, so it adds additional value. I did, for example, 100 negotiation tips. People are going through hard times at the moment, particularly, and if they needed to make a purchase and obviously they want to get the best value for money, then what better way than to say, here's some techniques that you could use if you want to do so. So not just about the podcast, but here's something that I do as an additional thing for you guys. I hope that helps. I did a 40 energy and money saving tips. So, I don't know how things are in your neck of the woods, but over here, electricity and gas have absolutely skyrocketed in cost. And people are really struggling. And I'm worried about certainly the older generation, how they can afford these things. My parents are no spring chickens anymore, shall we say. They're very worried. Their pension can only go so far. So, hey, I need to give back. I know ways of saving money, for doing different things in different ways. Let's share that with my audience. It's not on the podcast. It doesn't matter. It's not on the podcast. It's part of what who I am and what I do is to help people all the time in whatever walk of life they're currently in. So I had a huge response from that. I've never had so many followers as a result of doing that.
So I'm going to put you on the spot, Dave. You mentioned that you asked your guests to do a little shout out, little thing. How about doing one for me for the How to Podcast series, and you being on here with me? And I'm going to do what you just did. I'm going to use this to promote this episode out. So do you want to do one for me? And I'll just take this out and I'm going to use this. Is that all right with you?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay,
no problem.
You're up.
I can
up.
Record something for you.
Right now. Let's do it right now.
Hello, I'm Dave Barr. I'm the host of the Real Life Buyer podcast, and I'm currently with Dave Campbell, and we're talking about podcasting, and we're discussing some really cool things about what equipment to get, why am I podcasting, where am I going with my podcasting, and I want to share all these different things with you, obviously with Dave and his audience, and hopefully you'll get something out of this to give you the encouragement to get out there, become a podcaster, make a change in the world, and do something that's really going to help people in their lives as well. So, hope you enjoyed this podcast. We've had great fun, and I really enjoy working with Dave, and I look forward to doing some more work maybe in the future.
Oh, wow. See, there you go. That's exactly how it's done, everyone. This is a super idea, Dave, and I love it. I'm going to use more often. Great suggestion, by the way. One thing that I like to ask my guests is I listen to their other episodes. So if I have a guest coming on and they've guested somewhere else, I listen to their episode. And then when I sit down and talk to them in a pre-interview, what I say to them is, hey, I heard you on Dave Barr's podcast. I heard you on Dave Campbell's podcast. Now, you've already done those great interviews. Is there anything that you haven't had a chance to talk about in depth, or a topic that you haven't covered yet that would be really interesting to you on this episode with me? Anything that I can serve you, because you've already done such a great job over on Dave Barr's podcast. I want to give you something different that you can use. And what I'm asking basically is, I want to give you a podcast as a guest on my show that you are so excited about, you can't wait to share it, without me saying to you, Dave Barr, will you please share my episode? I want to create something for you that you're just like, I have never been able to talk about this before. I'm so excited. I can't wait to share this with my group. So I'm just opening the door by saying, is there anything you haven't talked about that you want to talk about with me? Because I'd like to do that for you. And people are like, yes, I love that question. And then they always share it. I don't have to ask.
Yeah, that's an interesting technique. I just want to pick up on the point you made there about listening to other people's podcasts, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I will always do is make sure that my guests are, I thoroughly research my guests. I spend a lot of time, and I will read their books before I engage with them in a podcast. So I check out their social media, I check out their LinkedIn profile, I check out other podcasts they've been on, I read their books, I download things from their website. I really do a lot of research because I owe it to them to make sure that I understand what they do, what they're about, and that enables me to ask hopefully the right questions in my podcast that I would like to think my audience would like me to ask. I don't want to just turn up and ask a bunch of questions. I want them to be questions that have been thought through, and I've given the care and consideration for my guests to have taken the time to honour them in the way they deserve to be. So I think that's one thing I haven't mentioned so far. I think it's really important that you do your research. They're giving their time to me, and it may only be, let's say, an hour, but an hour to these people, these individuals, can be worth an awful lot of money. I know what some of these people are charging for their time, and they're giving me an hour of their time. The least I can do is to do some research and proper homework before I have them on to my podcast. And we talk about questions. That helps me, as I said, to get the right questions. Hopefully, I don't want to ask questions that other people necessarily ask because they're in a list of things that, oh, you can ask this guest X, Y, and Z. Yeah. That's not what I'm about. I'm not going to do a podcast like that. I want to ask the questions I want to ask, and I want them to be something that the guests feel they're just not copy paste.
Yeah. Yeah, and the one thing I like to avoid saying to any guest is, Dave, I ask all my guests this question, so the question is blah, blah, blah. There's a little subtle little thing happening behind the scenes when you say, I ask everybody this question. It's almost like you're just like everyone else I've had on. You can ask the question without saying, I ask all my guests this question. You can just ask the question. And if your listeners are listening, they will know that you normally ask that question. You just don't have to frame it as, I ask all my guests this question, right? It just makes them not feel special, unique, or different, or, right? They just kind of feel like, oh, everybody gets a question. Doesn't matter who's on here, they all get the same question. So yeah, just to maybe erase that little part of it and still go ahead and ask the question because it's important. Just kind of how you frame it, I think. And treat your guests with, again, like you mentioned, people giving their time. From my point of view, when I have a guest come on my podcast, they've already paid me with their time. So they do not owe me anything as far as promotion. They don't owe me anything as far as, giving attention to this episode. My goal, and what I tell them is, I'm now joining your team as a promo member of your team. I'm on your promotional team now as a podcast host. You've come on my show. My job now, after we're done, is I want to promote the episode. I want to promote you. I want to give your audience the chance to hear this great interview with you. That's my goal. I'm part of your team now. You're not joining my team. I'm joining your team as the host. And you can see them kind of thinking like, wow, that's different. Because usually it's about all the things that I'm asking you to do after the fact. So I like your approach, Dave. It's really good.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I've had a number of my guests that have not come on because they're authors, but as a consequence of who and what they are, they bring out a book. And if they've already released a book, then I will, as part of my promotion, say, hey, I've interviewed this lady, gentleman, whatever the case may be. This is an image of their book. Brilliant book. I have read it because I have. Mm-hmm. And I will push that out to my audience as well as saying it's something that they may wish to consider as part of the the experience with the guest. In fact, some of the guests have subsequently come out with new books, and I've contacted those guests again and say, hey, great to be in contact with you. I've just seen you've brought out a new book. I'd love to be able to promote that. If you want to send me some imagery, then just drop it across and I'll do a shout out for you. I only did that last week to a person, a fantastic guy called Mario Beckis, has just brought out a new book. And I thought, hey, I really like this guy. I loved his first book, and I think it's great. Just because he's not on my podcast, planned to be on my podcast right now, or any time particular in the future. But he was a genuine person, extremely kind and generous with his time. And if I can help him, as you say, going forwards, then I would do that. And I would honour any of my guests in the same way. I'd always give shout-outs to my guests. I always like and follow what they do. And I will comment on what they do as well. Because for me, that's part of the experience. And if my guests like me, they'll promote me naturally anyway. And I think it's the right thing.
One little trick that I'm working on too, Dave, is I live near Niagara Falls. Very iconic. People travel from all over the world to see Niagara Falls. It's a big hill with lots of water, but everyone loves to see it, right? So what I like to do is I take the book from my guest. If they send me a copy of the book, which I'm so grateful for, by the way, I will take it and I will set it up by Niagara Falls with it in the background and take a picture of their book. And I send it to them, like their book, no matter where they are in the world. They may be from New Zealand or Mexico or America. My book is now at Niagara Falls. And now they want to share that because look at my book.
Brilliant idea.
My book made it to Niagara Falls with Niagara Falls in the background. So for you, if you have a Canadian author, an American author, and they send you one, if you have a local area, iconic area where you could put the book and frame it in a picture, it'd be like all my books in England. Oh, your guest will share that like crazy because that is unique. Not every host is going to do something like that, right?
That's a brilliant idea. Not something I've considered, but yes, there are some areas not far from where I live that are quite well known around the world. So I shall take that tip. Absolutely, thanks for that.
Yeah, and that shares
it's
really
all these little
well,
things, isn't it?
Right? It shares really well on Instagram and Facebook or LinkedIn, whatever. Those kind of photos are really shareable. So awesome. So Dave, what is the future like for you in the podcast? What are you planning?
Well, I've already got, as you have, quite a few podcasts in the bank. I'm going to continue on a weekly basis at the moment. It's something that to increase the kind of levels, my hat off to you, that to be releasing episodes daily and the frequency you are is just incredible. I think that is amazing, and you deserve a huge amount of credit for that. So. Brilliant. I can't even consider going to that at the moment. So I'm obviously going to keep going with my podcast. I've got some changes coming up in my life for next year, and I see the podcast as being complementary to what I do day to day. And so I'm looking at my future 5 years. I'm in my 50s now. I'm no young individual now, but I want to keep pushing out great information to people. I want to keep sharing the information that people share with me. There's some fantastic guests I've got lined up that are coming out now that are going to make a difference to people in this world, and I'm going to keep going down that route. I'm not worried about. There's a lot of people keen to get obsessed about making money out of podcasts. If it does, great, but I'm not. That isn't my driver at all. It's purely about meeting great people, sharing their message, and helping other people in turn. And I see no reason to stop doing that at this point in time. I've got a very supportive family who, my wife's just hiding away in a separate room at the moment, so I can record this. And they're great. Every time I say, look, I'm going to be recording, my son disappears, my wife goes in a different room, I couldn't ask for a better support than that. But I'm not looking for any amazing things. If it helps one person, as I said before, then that's enough for me to continue to keep interviewing the right people and giving the right messages out there.
Dave, I love your heart. I love your spirit, your approach to all of this. The way you are focused on your podcast is refreshing when a lot of people are in it for the money and not for the listener, not for the guest. But I love how you, Dave, are just so focused on your guests and your audience, and you just have a great heart towards your podcast. I love your approach. It's beautiful.
Thanks for that. It means a lot to me, as I said, about these people. some of these people are extremely influential, have made the true mark on this world, and just to have them share with me just a small amount of their time is incredible. And for me to be able to connect that to my listeners, it really is fulfilling. I don't know how else to really explain it. It makes me feel good inside, and that's my only motivation. This is no other reason. Is purely to if it makes me feel good, it gives people something new to follow up and make a change in their life, then what else could I possibly want to achieve? Yeah. A few bucks here and there is irrelevant, really.
Have you heard back from your audience, Dave? Has anybody reached out to you from around the world and given you some feedback, some love for what you've been producing?
Yeah, I've had, certainly on my social media, then it's not unusual for me to receive a DM or a comment. People have contacted me and say, this podcast struck a chord with me. It helped them in their day-to-day work. But some people have become quite personally affected by it in a much more, not a superficial way, but in a really intense way. And they've come back to me and said, look, that really made me stop, think. I've listened to this 2 or 3 times.
Wow.
It's helped me in a way. And, one particular lady really kind of surprised me, moved me. I thought, my goodness, that is amazing that I've impacted her and made a change in her life when she clearly perhaps wasn't in the best places at the time. Well, what better reward? Really, what better reward was there?
Yeah, I had, I mentioned on an earlier episode of this podcast, I had somebody in Brazil. His name is Paulo. He's been listening to this podcast and listening to my co-host coming on with me and talking and sharing thoughts about podcasting. And from our conversations, he has now started a podcast to help people in Brazil to learn English. And he's using the podcast to do that because of this podcast. And I'm like, and when the email came through, I have this little thing on my website where you can leave a voice message through SpeakPipe, and people can leave their audio message from you, and it comes to you in an email. And I hit play on it, and here's Paulo in Brazil sharing his story about how this podcast helped him. And Dave, I really had this moment of just like, that's a real person. That's a real person who listened to the podcast. That's not a number on some statistic where I can see people listening. That's an actual person who took time to say thank you. And I didn't know what to do. I was so excited and happy that somebody was helped by a podcast. So I love that feeling. So if you're a listener to a podcast, if you're listening to Dave's podcast, reach out to Dave and let him know what you love about it, because that just helps us so much when we're not looking for money. We want to help people. When we hear back from you as a listener, I tell you, that is something that just gets us going for the next week or month easily. Just hearing your feedback.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I love it, Dave.
Yeah, it is inspirational and motivational. Those 2 words come through strong and clear. Because I'll go ahead and say to my friends and family, hey, I've just had this person contact me. They've said this and this. That message will spread. Yeah. And it's infectious, isn't it? Really, it's in the right way. It's infectious. And sometimes, can be tough work. As I said, the amount of work you do is incredible. I know only hours I put into this work myself. And sometimes it can be hard. But when you get something like that gives you an adrenaline rush, it just makes all the difference. You want to carry on, going to go through and do that next thing.
I love it, Dave. Let's close off with this. What are you excited about in podcasting? What do you think is going to happen like in a few years with podcasting? Is it going to grow? Is it going to kind of borderline stop or like not grow? How do you see podcasting in the future?
I'm surprised how much it has grown already in the 2 years I've been podcasting. I see far, far more people who, I said, business owners that I spoke to in the UK hardly knew what a podcast was. I remember some friends who when I started to post about podcasting said, "What is a podcast?" Now everybody knows what a podcast is. You see it on the TV, you watch the TV and you can't name the stations, but they say, "Oh, we're just releasing our podcast." It's exploding. Certainly in the UK, I can certainly say for there, it is exploding, and it's got so much further to reach. You were talking about obviously this fantastic person in Brazil. I get people contact me from India, Australia, as you say, Canada, US, China, all around the world, and it's spreading like wildfire. So I think it's certainly got a lot more legs to travel on, should we say. I'm not too familiar of how big it is in the US, but it looks enormous already. I see a lot of podcasts where people don't have the longevity to keep continuing it. I go through the feeds and say, "Oh, this one looks interesting," and the last time it came out was 6 months ago. So there's a lot of people that don't continue it on. So there's, it's a shame. For whatever reason, they felt they didn't or couldn't carry on. But I still see there's an awful lot more to go. Absolutely, this is a global phenomenon that's still growing at a heck of a rate, for sure.
Awesome. Well, Dave, it's been a great conversation, Dave. I would love to have you back again in the future and to continue talking. Again, I love your approach, and I love how you are, again, so focused on your guests, so focused on your audience, and providing a great podcast for everyone. It's amazing. It's really, really good. So, Dave, how do people find you? How do they connect with you? Where are you most active so people can reach out?
I'm extremely active on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and now TikTok. But with the sensible videos, should we say? Something, a new experience. I've come to like TikTok. So if you look under the Real Life Barr, you'll find plenty of posts for you to go through, and you'll see all my social media through there, or my website, thereallifebar.co.uk.
Beautiful. Dave, thank you so much for being part of the conversation. Well wishes for you and your family. They can all come out of hiding now that we've done recording. And
I'll give them the all clear. You can come out now.
I love it. And I thank you for sharing your ideas and your tips. And I think people listening to our conversation today are going to have some great ideas that they can use in their podcast or to start their podcast just by listening to your story. So, Dave, thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I've had a great time. Cheers, Dave.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Hey, this is Dave from the podcast. Thank you for listening to the How to Podcast series. We have a new website, easy to find, howtopodcast.ca. Not .com, .ca. I'm in Canada, so .ca. Howtopodcast.ca is how to find us. How easy is that, right? How did I get that domain? Oh, howtopodcast.ca. Link in the show note below. This is just a quick little thing to let you know, hey, the website's being worked on. It's active. You can go there now. howtopodcast.ca. I would love for you to come over there. It's not the .com. Somebody already had that. I have the .ca because I live in Canada. Ta-da! So, howtopodcast.ca. I'll see you over there. Thank you for being part of the podcast. Make sure you subscribe, like, follow, and do all the things we ask you to do. Catch you on the next one.